Elizabeth I by Emily Curtis and Julia Jarrett. Elizabeth I's extensive rights came from fulfilling her many responsibilities, some of which were organizing a strong diplomatic government, powerful troops, gaining trust of neighboring countries, and regaining the trust of her heavily taxed, starving kingdom. These responsibilities helped her gain more rights, which caused her to deal with the constant danger of other countries clamoring for England. Some of the rights Elizabeth gained were marital rights, religious rights, and women's rights. Journey back in time to discover why Elizabeth I is one of the most revered queens in history.
Early childhood. Elizabeth led a difficult childhood. Her father was Henry VIII, infamously remembered for his 6 wives. Elizabeth's mother, Anne Boleyn, was her father's second wife, and Elizabeth's half-sister, Mary Tudor, hated her because their father had divorced her mother, Catherine of Aragon, to marry Anne. Anne was beheaded for having an affair when Elizabeth was very young, causing Elizabeth to lose many of her rights, including the title princess, though she was still second in line for the throne. Less than a day after Elizabeth's mother lost her life, her father was formally betrothed to Jane Seymour, who gave birth to Edward VI, who became first in line for the throne, leaving Elizabeth third and last in line.
Teenage years. Jane Seymour died 2 weeks after Edward's birth, and Elizabeth had yet another stepmother, Anne of Cleves, whose marriage to Henry VIII was diplomatic and soon ended in divorce. Soon after, Henry married yet again, this time to Catherine Howard, who, like Anne Boleyn, was accused of having an affair and beheaded. During this troubled time in her life, Elizabeth became very close to her stepbrother Edward, but their half-sister, Mary, was never very close to either of them. Finally, Henry VIII married his 6th and last wife, Catherine Parr, who was the best tutor, mummy, and queen to Henry's 3 surviving children. Catherine taught Mary, Elizabeth, and Edward everything she knew, which included reading, math, musical instruments, and other languages. Through her kindness, Catherine gained a special relationship with Elizabeth and Edward, but Catherine Parr could never gain Mary's love or even her trust, because Mary still held a grudge against all of Henry VIII's wives after he divorced her own mother, Catherine of Aragon. Thanks to Catherine's kindness, Elizabeth was a master at the lute, quick at math, and fluent in 6 different languages, including English, Spanish, French, and Latin by the end of her education, all of which helped strengthen and expand her rights.
Gloriana, Elizabeth's reign. After Edward, who fell ill with the measles and pneumonia and later died of tuberculosis, and Mary, who became known as Bloody Mary when she murdered over 285 Protestants in an attempt to return England to Roman Catholicism, reigned, it was finally Elizabeth's turn for the throne. At her first entry to the kingdom, the entire town cheered. After being heavily taxed and starved by Edward VI and Mary I, the country needed Elizabeth, who physically resembled Henry. Almost immediately, Elizabeth began the difficult task of becoming an honorable monarch. She dealt with France and Spain, who were fighting over England. Neighboring countries and her subjects didn't trust her at first, because Mary, who, in an attempt to return England to Roman Catholicism, had murdered many Protestants. Some people thought Elizabeth was insane, for she despised marriage, thinking of it as unrewarding, probably because of the chaos her father's marriages had caused in her childhood. Some people believed she had no status or power without a king, but she quickly proved them wrong, using her clever, strong, diplomatic mind to solve all these problems cleverly, fairly, and kindly, and gaining more rights and responsibilities, including the power she had that allowed her not to marry, or to change England, rightfully, back to Protestant, than any monarch before her. She dealt with foreign powers by organizing a strong diplomatic government and powerful troops, which enabled her to keep clamoring countries from taking over England, while also holding the trust of everyone around her. She even went out to a battlefield to deliver a speech to motivate her soldiers. She helped her own people by posing more reasonable taxes than her half-siblings. All of these amazing accomplishments helped convince both her own people and foreign countries that she was sane.
Primary source: speech from Elizabeth I to army at Tilbury on eve of Spanish Armada, 1588. My loving people, we have been persuaded by some that are careful of our safety to take heed how we commit ourselves to multitudes of fear of treachery. But I do assure you, I do not desire to live to distrust my faithful and loving people. Let tyrants fear. I have always so behaved myself that under God I have placed my chiefest strength and safeguard in the loyal hearts and goodwill of my subjects. And therefore I am come amongst you, as you see at this time, not for my recreation and disport, but being resolved, in the midst and heat of battle, to live or die amongst you all, to lay down for my God, and for my kingdoms, and for my people, my honor, and my blood even in the dust. I know I have the body of a weak, feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king, and a king of England too. And think, foul scum, that Parma or Spain, or any prince of Europe, should dare to invade the borders of my realm, to which, rather than any dishonor should grow by me, I myself will take up arms. I myself will be your general, judge, and rewarder of every one of your virtues in the field. I know already, for your forwardness, you have deserved rewards and crowns, and, we do assure you, on the word of a prince, they shall be duly paid you. For the meantime, my Lieutenant General Leicester shall be in my stead, than whom never prince commanded a more noble or worthy subject, not doubting but by your obedience to my general, by your concord in the camp, and your valor in the field, we shall have a famous victory over these enemies of my God, of my kingdom, and of my people.
The rights of a monarch. Finally, Elizabeth had gained more rights than any queen before her. She retained all of the usual rights and responsibilities of a monarch, including setting taxes, ruling over people, commanding troops, and appointing jobs, which she, unlike many monarchs, accomplished while keeping the people's best interests in mind. But what made Elizabeth special? Elizabeth gained more religious rights, not only for herself, but also for her kingdom, ending religious persecution and switching the kingdom back to Protestantism. She gained more women's and marital rights, for she was no longer thought of as a weak, defenseless woman without a husband, because she still chose not to marry, and was accepted throughout the country as being equal and even superior to any king.
Elizabeth I will always be remembered as a kind, fair, beautiful, independent, and strong monarch. She gained the trust of all of her people because she never put herself before them. Her lifelong efforts paid off because she fulfilled all of her responsibilities. She gained many rights. Her benevolent 65-year rule is remembered for the prosperity she brought to England as the Elizabethan age. Elizabeth herself was often thought of as the Mother of England.